Yo, what is going on today, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing fantastic. Today, we're talking about solo lane mages and how to play around them. Too many times in my ranked games, I see everybody on my team trolling when we have this mage solo. Even if the mage solo is winning lane, as soon as he gets out of lane, he rotates, 5v5s happen, and everything goes to... I don't want to swear for Mario. Everything goes to crap. And you just start losing the game because you have a mage solo and your team's not playing well around it. Maybe your comp is bad with the mage solo. So I'm going to talk about what you need to do in every single role when you are playing with this mage solo and what changes for you. So starting with solo laners, you are a pseudo frontline. You're not a true tank frontline. You're not a dive frontline. Yes, you can dive if you have an opening. Sometimes you might have to dive if you're like playing like a Blink Morgan Le Fay. You might have to look to dive at some points. But for the most part, you're just like a pseudo frontliner, just kind of poking and trading. That's really all you need to do in those late game team fights. The biggest point is you need to win lane. You need to win lane and you need to get ahead. If you're playing into another mage, obviously it's slightly different because you're both going to be kind of doing the same thing. But you just need to be farming if it's a mage into mage matchup. But if it's mage into warrior, you need to be winning that lane. And when it scales into the mid and late game, you need to understand how tanky you are. Are you dive into the back line, nobody can kill you? Or maybe if you Aegis the big mage ultimate, there's nobody that can kill you, and then you can kind of dive with the jungler and get kills. Whatever it is, you need to understand how tanky you are. Yes, this goes for every game, but it is very, very important when you're playing these mage solo laners because you are just less tanky than you were before, but that doesn't mean your survivability is any less. If you have a lot of sustain, vamp, Typhons, Pythags, all this stuff, that's a lot of survivability. But if they have a lot of anti-heal, or if they've got like a fed crit hunter, your survivability changes. So understand how tanky you are in those late game team fights, those mid game team fights. Now, junglers, your job kind of changes the most. Unfortunately, if you have a mage solo, it's a more of a, you're no longer really a carry in the perfect world. A lot of the times when you see these mage solos, you'll see like Erlangs or Jotun's breastplate Fenrir's, or it's not Fenrir that's usually played. Jotun's breastplate or junglers, and it's just gods that can really be engagers. They just need to start the fights, kind of pull relics, kind of do some damage, kind of have some semblance of team fight potential, some CC. That's what your job kind of is as a jungler. You need to be the one willing to engage because you really don't have anyone else on your team that, this might sound not great, but you are probably the least important player on the map when you're playing this jungler role with the mage solo, because their life matters a lot because you need to get them ahead. If they fall behind, they're not going to be that useful. Mid laners are always going to be super important. ADCs are going to be super important. And then we'll get to why support is really important. But you're probably the least important. So Erlangs, Pele's, stuff like that. Something that you can just get in there, start fights, and just go wild. It's not necessary to kill anyone. Yes, obviously it's good to get kills. But going in, get fights started, and then like disengaging once you got like 2 people, 3 people down to half health. That's all you need to do. You don't need to kill anyone. That's not the job of you. It's the job of your solo, your mid, and your ADC. Their job is to kill now, not your job. I'm sad. You should have some semblance of survivability. Kali can engage, can kill people, but she is not like a good type of jungler with this because 1, she's not early game. 2, she's not great engage. 3, she doesn't have great survivability outside of ultimate, which is more in the late game. So she's not great in a comp like this. We also saw some like Alma jungle, and everything you really have. I mean, she's an okay engager. I think she lacks in that, but she makes up for it around objectives. When you go to objectives, she just makes it impossible to lose fights around objectives because of how strong she is. She's really survivable. She's pretty solid early game in the jungle because of just how high her 2's damage is, and then just auto attacks. And her 1, and her, actually, okay. Every one of her abilities is strong early game. But that's kind of the job of the jungler. Engage, relics, survivability, that's what you need to do. And early game. Mid laners, you and ADCs, your job doesn't change very much. We'll talk about ADCs a little bit more when we get down to them, but your job's not really changing. The one thing I would say is don't be too reliant on CC. Gods like Kukulkan, not going to be as great in a comp like this because your damage needs to be a little bit somewhat more confirmable. You're not playing around really easy fights where your jungler is going to be able to one-shot and set up at the same time. You just need to be able to just hit abilities, poke them down. Gods like Baba, MLF, and then somewhat self-survivable, somewhat self-reliant. You don't want to be too reliant on peel because you don't want to be the biggest worry like, oh, I'm playing Zeus. I'm not reliant on CC, really, but I need some help. Those are the 2 things I would say. Just be a little self-reliant and don't be too reliant on CC. And then supports, not nearly as much changes as with jungle, but there's really 2 options when you're playing support with this mage solo, and it's 1, the backline style, and 2, the setup style. The backline style is you are playing something like Khepri. We've seen Aurora play it with Guan Yu. I don't think the Guan is great, but they've won with it a lot. You need to be willing to engage still. Is there an opening? Is there somebody you can pull and you can kind of burst them? Is somebody's beads down? You can play up and kind of look for those beads. You need to still be able to do that because you are the true frontliner on the team. And that's the second part of this is you still have to frontline. Does not matter if you're playing Khepri. Does not matter if you're playing Geb. You need to be able to play in front of your team's comp because if you're not doing that, then there's just so much free engage potential on your team because you just don't have a true solo laner. So someone on your team could just get bursted very easily. You don't want that to happen. And the other side of things is setup gods, Athena's. Obviously, Emoji can kind of play both styles, both setup and backline. The same thing is still the same. Your life matters as you're the only true tank. So you still have to be able to live in a lot of fights. 2, you need to be able to punish beads that are being burned by you and your jungler. If you're dash taunting, those beads are down. Kill them. Yeah, that doesn't really change in actual warrior gods, but you have more damage in those late game team fights because you have a mage and solo lane instead of an Osiris or something. So it still matters. It just matters more because you actually have just more one-shot potential. And then 2 is just burn beads. Make sure you're burning beads. Lastly, for both supports, your relics matter more now than ever. Do they have healing? And you need anti-heal. Your solo laner's not going to be able to pick up that spare onk. So make sure that you're getting the perfect relics. Think about the relics you needed to go. Bracers, shells, whatever it is, sprints. Make sure you're thinking about it. And then lastly, for ADCs, again, like I said with mages, not too much changes. You're still self-reliant. That's a big thing. 2, build crit. Especially if you're playing into double, like there's double mage solos on both sides. Build crit. Mage solos are not building spectral. Surely it doesn't matter, or it literally does not matter if the support is building spectral. Your comp has so much damage with these mage AD or mage solos that if the support has spectral, he will die to your mid and he will die to your solo laner. So just build crit. If you force out a spectral, great. Your 2 magic dealers will then be able to kill him. And then beyond that, not much changes. So just build crit. Self-reliant, simple. If you guys are curious on the notes I was reading from, this is it. If you want like a screenshot just to be able to understand how to play around this. But this is just what I was looking at, just so I could read it off. There it is. A little video on mage solos. Help you guys get through. I've had too many ranked games thrown because we have mage solos and nobody knows how to play around them. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you guys again next time. Peace.